How's it going, guys? Welcome to another episode, a long overdue episode of End Times Now with Bree. I'm Bree. Here, the topic of conversation between me, myself, this microphone, and your ears is the end times. Imagine that. Dude, it is so end times right now. You guys know the routine by now, right? I'm looking for people to talk to. I have a couple of people that I'm talking to this week. I'm excited about that. And I'll be sure to put all the links in the description. But please be sure to hit me up on that social medias and do the thing. You know, share, subscribe, like, all the things. You know, because these messages are important. Not because it comes from me, okay? I'm just a mouthpiece. I'm just a big mouth. Seriously. It's because it's provable. It's a provable truth. And I really feel like in this day and age, we all need this hope as we continue to navigate through these end days. It's getting ugly out there. So I'm here to help make sense of it all and hopefully offer some sort of comfort through it all. Because there's a lot of fear and anger and depression and anxiety and just and confusion, all of that stuff. And so my goal is to offer a provable truth, and that way when you guys are out there and you're experiencing some of this stuff and you're checking the stats out there, it's not quite as heavy. Speaking of heavy, if you guys didn't catch my last episode, go check it out. I started a series. In fact, I started a couple. One of them is called Face to Face, and that is where the goal is to offer up a platform for those of you who have a story that you'd like to tell and would like to be heard. The last one was with one of my listeners named Zach. God bless you, Zach. And his story is still sinking into my brain. I am not only grateful that he, and honored that he chose to share it with us, but I'm amazed that he's still breathing. Just saying. It's a miracle. So go check that out. But the other one's called Off the Cuff. And basically Off the Cuff is literally because so many things are changing so rapidly. I like have no other choice but to get on, and I'll be doing these as videos, hopefully, because I did this very episode that you guys are listening to right now on a video, and it wouldn't upload. So there's that. But the whole thing is that because things are changing so rapidly, I'm like, well, maybe you all just need to like ADD out with me and watch that happen in real time, you know, and then that way I can deliver the things as they come. So yeah, so that's coming too. Also on the quote unquote what's new front, I'm working on a website. So if I seem like I'm MIA, I'm not. I'm just I've decided to like bury myself. Is pretty much what that is. Deciding to do that, and then like this series is you know, it's probably the worst time that I could have decided to do that. But what's happening is that I found that on some certain social media sites, you know, they're being kind of poopy, to say the least. And they're not letting the podcast go through, and they're not letting people like and comment and stuff like that. And that hurts the algorithm, of course. And the whole reason why I'm doing this is so that the ears can hear, right? More ears. And yeah, so obviously it's not live just yet, but when it is, it's called endtimesnowwithbree.com. And I'm going to have podcasts on there, along with some news and, all that good stuff. And Eric and I are going to start putting some merch out there in the hopes to spread the word. And I did not want to do this. Okay. But the fact of the matter is that we need a little bit of help to support what we're doing here, because the truth of the matter is my husband, he's a rock star. And if it weren't for him, like, he's the one supporting all of this. Technically, I should be working a traditional job, but that's not what God has in store, right? So he is doing it all. And like, to the point where he understands my brain. So if I am having a hard time and it's taking me a while to focus or whatever, and like dinner's not ready by 7, he picks up the slack and he does it. So really, what it comes down to is just teamwork. But I feel like he's carrying the brunt of it. And so as a result, rather than go get a full-time job, I decided to start selling merch that says End Times Now with Brie. So that way there's more people out there that can get the truth. And, we're going to make it really simple. Nothing extravagant, just the norm, like hoodies and t-shirts. And then, like, of course, coffee mugs, because coffee, maybe some hats and, visors, because I like visors. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then, yeah, so if you or anybody that does that kind of a thing, please let me know, because that would be great, because I have no idea where to go with that. Yeah. Also, if you're not following me on social media, please do. I'll put all the links in the description, but also if you want to know what's really going on out there, follow me on Telegram, because this is where you're going to get all the updates of, what's going on with the war in Israel and beyond. Okay. There's a lot of things that I can't post on Facebook or the Twitter. So yeah. Okay. So this is a continuation of a series that we've been doing on the end of days. This one in particular is regarding Satan's unholy trinity, is what I like to call that. So we're, touching on Revelation and the Antichrist and so on. In the last episode, we got into Revelation a bit, and we left off talking about the 144,000. We also speculated a little bit on where the Antichrist comes from. But here's the deal. I want you guys to understand, I am not just skimming. I know it looks like I'm skimming through Revelation right now, and I am, but that's not, that isn't like what this series is about. This series in particular is not about, like picking through Revelation. When we do that, we will pick through it. Okay. When you see a title that pops up and says picking through Revelation, that's the one. Okay. This one in particular is just, we're kind of bouncing. And the idea here is so that you guys, you understand who the Antichrist is. Now, I am a firm believer in focus on Christ. Okay. We should be focusing on Christ, not the Antichrist. But here's my issue. There's a lot of people out there who they're like, well, you should really just be focusing on Christ. No kidding, right? However, there's a lot of our job out here is to reach the people who don't know, right? They don't know Christ. If they don't know Christ, they're not going to know Antichrist. So I feel like it's my job to like pass that along, so that way they at least know that. If they're not going to, let Christ in and eat that pizza with him or chop suey. I made chop suey tonight, by the way, and it was really good. Then they should at least know like what not to do. You know what I mean? And I feel like that is that's the whole thing, because we're getting close. And I feel like he's going to, make his debut any minute. Okay, so we talked about the fact that he's called the Assyrian, and said how, there could be some evidence to the possibility that maybe he could have some Danite blood, right? Also, there's some things that I initially thought like years ago and up until recently, and now I've kind of like gone away from that, and we'll get into that later. But I'm going to flip the whole Antichrist is a Jew thing on its head, and speculate a different idea. And when this is all over, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this whole series, because we're, iron sharpens iron, right? We have to remain teachable, you guys. That's the bottom line. Okay, so when we left off on the 144,000, we see in Revelation, immediately following in chapter 7, verses 9, we see there are martyrs in white robes. And John says that he sees a great multitude, right, which no man could number, of all the nations, kindreds, people, and tongues. And they all stood before the throne and before the Lamb, and clothed with white robes, with palms in their hands. This is obviously the fruits of the labor of the 144,000. Okay, but then we touched on the fact that whomever the Antichrist is, the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims would have to accept him, and the Hindus, right? Like everyone is going to have to accept this turkey. So the question today is how? How are all of these people going to accept this guy? Well, I think I know how. But first, we need to talk about what's going out there in crazy. What's going on in crazy land, Brianna? Okay. Well, Rebecca, I think you pronounce it Lavrenzi. I'm not sure, but she's that 70-year-old great-grandmother that was like, they were like picking on her because she went into the White House or the Capitol building, and she was praying for 10 minutes. Okay. She was convicted earlier this month. She was convicted, and she was sentenced to 1 year in prison. Okay. Not because she chopped somebody's head off, right? But because she entered the Capitol building on January 6th and prayed. And then she talked to a cop. Yeah. You got it, guys. It's total mayhem out there. Like, we've got to do something about these praying grandmothers. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, who does she think she is? Praying. She thinks she's an American? A Christian American? Praying? In the Capitol building? How dare she? Listen, she's got no criminal record, engaged in no property damage. She remained peaceful, nonviolent. She stayed for 10 minutes. I mean, whoa. I'm just so glad that they're, handling this situation and leaving all the squatters' rights in check, for crying out loud. I mean, at least everywhere except for Florida, of course. But I don't know if you guys saw this, but there's like these, there's certain states that are having like 911 issues. They can't call 911. It's weird. Florida's one of them. But you guys, this is no joke. If you're selling your home or you guys have a second home, you better be checking on that, because these guys are not playing. They are straight up like fabricating, getting into homes. I believe that there was one lady that they murdered her, chopped her up, and put her in I don't even know. It's horrible. It's horrible. Set up them cameras. Okay. Cicada Geddon. Cicada-geddon. It's coming. Like, it needs to be a trailer for a movie or something. But here's the thing, you guys. It's going to be really gross. It's going to be gross, in my opinion. For all you bug lovers out there, I know you're fascinated by them, so I'm really sorry if my lack of excitement offends you, okay? But where I'm from, things like, fish flies and whatnot, they cause car accidents. And they send semi-trucks careening into medians in like Lake Michigan and whatever. Just from the sheer amount of these guys that decide that they want to die a brutal death because their mama didn't tell them not to set up shop in the middle of the road. It's really, really gross. It's like the birds, except it's the bugs. And I could totally see something like this occurring here, although not necessarily here, but rather for all of you out there in Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, Iowa, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Turns out there will be a double brood of cicadas hatching next month, and this is something that hasn't happened in more than 200 years, so people are flipping their lids over it. Because they, look at the prophecies of the Bible regarding the locusts. But I want to assure you, my friends out there, that this is not the plague of the locusts that the Bible speaks of. Okay, these cicadas don't survive on eating our crops. For lack of a better phrase, they eat tree juice. Yeah, and it'll all be over in a month and a half or so. But this right here is a good time to bring our attention to the fact that we are seeing a lot of prophecies come to pass, and these are things that are rare. And although I know it's a turbulent time to be alive, it's a good time to be alive, you guys. What we're witnessing are prophetic events coming to pass, and maybe it's just me, but I can't help but think that this is all happening at an increasingly rapid pace. For instance, what's happening in Gaza right now, I believe it's a prelude to Ezekiel 38, and I feel like what we're witnessing is the culmination of all that right now. And in Amos chapter 1, the prophecy regarding Gaza, it's coming to pass right now. And of course, there's Psalm 83. That's the doozy. Okay, but as you can see, I have not put an episode out in a while. And the reason is because every time I'm about to, something else happens that needs to be addressed. Or, of course, my technology fails because me. Which I'm kind of glad, I had an episode. I did an entire episode. I think I mentioned this earlier on video and can't get it to upload, but whatever. Okay, so currently I want to address the Ezekiel 38 idea. Okay, the current climate in the Middle East makes this whole thing very interesting. And a lot of people are talking about it, saying it's Ezekiel 38. Well, I have some things. I'm like raising my hand over here. I've got some things. So Turkey and Qatar have removed funding from Israel. And of course, Russia is now positioned at the Golan Heights and has been hooking up with Iran, hanging out. They're not eating pizza, though. They're eating hummus. I love hummus, by the way. But they're hanging out. They're playing that Fortnites and whatnot. And they're helping Iran. Russia's helping Iran secure weapons for the terrorist agenda. There's always that. And we saw the outcome of that on Saturday. And frankly, and I'm just going to say this, frankly, if I were Putin, I'd be a little red in the face because, they failed. They failed miserably. Thank God. It's like watching A Christmas Carol, the movie, or no, A Christmas Story, where Ralphie, like, he's tired of being bullied, and he finally embraces the psychopathy of it, and then, like, shanks the evil dude, you know? I mean, okay, well, maybe it wasn't quite like shanking, but I'm just saying. He flipped his lid and he beat him up. Okay, so then who's the stronger man here? Is it the guy who threw everything he had at the other guy who's like crouched in a corner with his hands covering his head, taking every blow? Or is it the guy who like takes the punches and then stands up after only to dust himself off and then put his dukes up and bust a move? Right? Who's the stronger guy? Israel is definitely the trembling cup for the nations right now. It's absolutely volatile. And in a minute, they're going to become the burdensome stone. They will remain on the map, you guys. 100%. And forever, as we know it, unless God, changes his mind. But Jacques Mallet, okay, so he's the guy that went into the WHO and was all like, I salute you with a middle finger. And he, that was a great speech, by the way, but he formally applied to NATO. He withdrew from BRICS and he formally applied to NATO. And then the USA, probably understanding that another bridge being taken out might mean their own families might be a little hungry for some sugar in their coffee. The USA did the right thing and vetoed 12 countries, including Britain and Switzerland, to recognize Palestine as a member state of the United Nations. So the thing is that Britain is like our ally, right? Like one of our strongest allies. And we told them, no, we ain't going to play that game. That's what they said. No, it was like, we don't want to play that game. I do a horrible British accent, you guys. I'm really sorry for you guys out there in the UK. I know I butchered it. But anyway, so we said no. And here's the thing. I'm just going to simply say this. For all of you guys out there living in these countries, including the US, our only hope is going to be to keep our hearts right where God wants us to be. Because the monarchies and the governments and the presidents and whatever, they're men and women, of course, but they are extremely valuable. And if they are not aligned with God and they are not aligned with Israel, there will be judgment. Just like there was when the United States abstained from the vote to ceasefire. Okay? Everybody and their grandmama knows that Israel cannot cease fire like that. Like that you cannot, I feel like it's that movie Aliens from like back in the day, like in the 80s, or maybe it was even the 70s. I don't know. Where that nasty alien, like you couldn't kill that thing fast enough. Like it just was, it kept getting up and coming back for more. That is the relationship with those guys in the Middle East. They will continue and continue and continue. So just be watching. Watch for the judgment to come. And then, of course, pray that you're not affected by it. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, understand this. Every single war that Israel's been in since 1948, at least, they've won. They have never lost a war. They conquered land and then gave it back. They conquered the Temple Mount and gave it back. You know, every single country that has opposed Israel has suffered. Okay? The U.S., we are experiencing a serious warning. And now, like, we are paying out the nose for it. So that's something to consider. They're a speck on the map. And yet they are a superpower. Yeah, just saying. So some of the other things that are in the land of nuts, you may have heard this story, Pastor Mark Driscoll. If you don't know, if you haven't heard about this one, this is crazy. Okay, so Mark Driscoll was preaching at a mega church, and John Lindell is the senior pastor there. Okay. There was a men's retreat called the Stronger Man's Conference, and out comes this guy named Alexander Magala. This dude is a past, he was a male stripper in his past, by the way, and I'm not judging him for that, but just listen. So he rips off his shirt. He comes out, gets on this platform, he rips off his shirt and starts to do a thing on this stripper pole. He swallows a sword and then proceeds to like ascend this pole. So here's my thing. Number one is if you've got a guy who comes to your church who apparently was a past stripper, but still has a stripper pole and is doing things at the church with the stripper pole, I'm going to say no. I'm just going to say no. And the way that Mark Driscoll handled the situation, I feel, is like a true man of God. He comes out, he's hoarse, first of all. He kneels down, he takes his hat off, and he says that he's going to say something that he doesn't want to. And let me tell you, I know what that feels like. It is really, really hard, especially when it's your family. This wasn't his family, but I'm just saying I know how that feels. But here he's got hundreds of guys there, and he says that he's hoarse because he was up praying all night for the guys because the Jezebel spirit was already there. And he starts to go into it. He's talking about the platform and how it was a high place. And the Bible does say, it talks about not making altars on high places and how this pole is a stripper pole and, you know, all this stuff. And he wasn't but a couple of minutes in. And in the background, you hear John Lindell. Well, you hear a guy who turns out to be John Lindell. He's saying, Mark, you're out of line. And then he's like, you're done. And Mark says, okay, I receive that. And then he puts his hat on, walks over to the pulpit, takes his Bible, and leaves. And then Lindell mentions Matthew 18 after the fact, which Matthew 18 says that if you have a problem with someone in your church, then you take it to the person and you talk to them. That seems right, doesn't it? But if that person still continues to do the thing that is wrong, then you're supposed to take it to that person along with an elder in the church. And then if they're still doing the wrong thing, then you take it to the church. Well, here's the thing. What was done in front of the whole, male congregation. So why would Mark go to Pastor Lindell and be like, yo, this is wrong? No. In fact, I am it just says a lot about the leadership in the church and a lot about why there's so many fake Christians out there. And why the people who genuinely understand and know Christ why most people don't want to follow, because it's hypocritical, and people like that give the rest of us a bad name. And Driscoll handled it. He handled it properly, in my opinion. And so, like, this whole thing, it was super symbolic. That poll was in honor of Asherah, which is Astaroth, and who is also Ishtar, blah, blah, blah. You guys know where I'm going with that. And then swallowing the sword. I mean, do I really need to get into that? The sword? But here's the thing. She would have her eunuchs, like, they were castrated, and they would castrate themselves, and then they would dance around with scalpels in their hands, chanting something about Inanna being genderless or whatever it was. But remember, Inanna is Ishtar. Ishtar is Astaroth. So on and so forth. And so here you've got a dude swallowing a sword and then ascending a pole. The rest is pretty self-explanatory, but this is why we need to be careful to be a Berean. We need to know what we know, and we need to know and what we don't need is a guy standing there telling us what that is, right? We need to find it in the Bible. It's one thing to get direction. It's another thing to take it as gospel if it's not in the gospel. Anyway, just saying. If you ask for God to clarify what the truth is, he'll do just that. Okay, here's one more crazy thing. So it turns out that according to a study that was published a while back in Scientific American, men displayed 43.7% fewer aggressive behaviors after smelling women's tears compared to the men who smelled a control solution. Yay! And I don't really know what to do with that, by the way, but I think that's hilarious. Also, Caitlyn Jenner's still a man. Okay, let's roll that beautiful bean footage. So, the Middle East. Let's remember that the loathing that these guys have for each other started in the womb, right? Back with Ishmael and Isaac. And so we can see what a task it would be for the Jews and the Muslims, let alone the Jews, Muslims, and Christians, to agree on something, let alone the Antichrist, especially now. However, you may be surprised to know that the Muslims actually have a lot that parallel revelation regarding who the Antichrist is. It's actually the Jews in both Christianity and Islam that suffer more than anyone at the hands of the Antichrist. Muslims, they believe that the Quran was orally revealed by God to the final. He was the final Islamic prophet named Muhammad through the archangel Gabriel, and it was over the course of about 23 years or so. Muhammad was about 40 years old, and it concluded in the year 632, which was when he died at the age of 61 or 62 years old. There's a couple of sources that Muslims will go to in order to get clarification on the context of their Quran, and it mostly relies on the outside commentary of men. They have what's called hadith, and this is it's a record, basically, of the words and actions of Muhammad as passed through the line of narrators. But it's much like the Jewish oral law, and that just like the oral law of the Jews isn't in the Old Testament anywhere. It's called the Mishnah, by the way. And then later, it's actually called the Talmud, but not just the Talmud, the Palestinian Talmud, which I find interesting. But just like that, neither are the laws and the traditions of the Hadith in the Quran. So to the Muslims, Christians, obviously, we have Jesus Christ. The Jews are still waiting for the Messiah, but to the Muslims, Jesus Christ is like Elijah in that Allah just one day up and and snatched him up. Okay, he didn't die. And so in their eyes, there was no death for him. In fact, in their eyes, Jesus was caught up by Allah only to be brought back during the end of days to fight something called the Dajall. And I'm just going to say, Islam does quite a bit to hammer in their opinion that Jesus wasn't the Messiah and that he wasn't the Son of God. He's not divine in their opinion. However, and this is very interesting, they have reserved a role for him in this play because apparently Jesus comes back to partner up with their long-awaited Mahdi. The Al-Mahdi is a very prominent figure in Islamic eschatology. Eschatology is the study of the end, basically. And he's believed to appear at the end of time to rid the world of evil and injustice. He's apparently a descendant of Muhammad who will appear shortly before Jesus and will lead the Muslim Ummah, to establish the caliphate. The Islamic Ummah is equivalent to the Christian church in that sense. He's mentioned in several compilations of the Hadith, but he's not in the Quran, which I find interesting. And he's a religious leader who comes to, like I said, reinstate the office of the caliphate. So here we have a guy who is probably equivalent to the false prophet in Revelation, possibly, because of the fact that the caliphate is a political religious faction. And then, of course, in Christianity, the one world religion of Satan's Trinity will be the same. It will be political. So I feel like they're running the same track. The founder and chairman of the Islamic Supreme Council of America states that if they see Mahdi, they should crawl over ice, do whatever it takes to get to him, and quickly give him your allegiance because he is the vice regent or the Khalifa of Allah. He will be the Mahdi. So the word vice regent, it's a lot like the word vicegerent, which is actually the same thing. It means representative, and there is another sect of people out there, religious sect, that use this word, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Just stick with me and we'll get into that a little bit later. Many of the Muslims, their practices are not even mentioned in the Quran. And that sounds a lot like Christianity. Just saying. They come from the Hadith. And so these are commentaries, and basically they're, like I said, oral laws given by men. They are traditions that are used to supplement their Quran. The Quran is basically regarding Allah. So it's like, as Allah saith. And then the Hadith is regarding Muhammad. So then Muhammad saith, basically. And then my thing is here, though, is that it's much like the Christian traditions, like Easter and Christmas. They're not biblical in any way. And I just want to make a note on this. Even though these traditions are quote unquote Christian, they're really not. For example, and I know that this is probably not going to sit right. Okay. And I am sorry, but I'm not sorry. But take Jeremiah chapter 10, verses 1-5, for instance. It says, "Thus saith the Lord, learn not the ways of the heathen." It says, "And be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. The customs of the people are in vain. For one cutteth down a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen, with an axe, and they deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not." So what is that, y'all? That's a Christmas tree. That's a Christmas tree. December 25th is a pagan holiday. I'm sure you guys have heard that before. It's definitely not when Christ was born. But I will tell you who was born. His name is Tammuz. And who is Tammuz? Well, that's Semiramis's baby boy with Nimrod. Nimrod, he was probably considered like the first Antichrist. He was a real turdlet. But he's the dude who got, he got kind of attuned with God, and he built the Tower of Babel, which means confusion, by the way. And like you've heard me say this before, Semiramis, she's also Ishtar. They're all related. And you've heard me say that Ishtar is Isis, and Isis is Aphrodite, is Astarte, is Ashtaroth, and on it goes. I swear it's like the Con, or like the Radio City Music Hall dancer people. They're all the same. Okay. And then so by now, right, we should be able, when this whole thing is over, we should be able to see exactly how how Satan mimics God, in the sense that everything is the same, except it's just a smidge off. And here's the thing. Satan doesn't care. He doesn't care about the fact that we like to say that Jesus is the reason for the season. He doesn't care about that. Just as long as we're idolizing all that retail and like maxing out our credit cards and whatnot, he doesn't care. Because if we're doing that, then we're not paying attention to Christ. And that's exactly what he wants. He doesn't care if we say it, just as long as we don't mean it. He just wants, he doesn't care. We don't even have to pay attention to him. Because as long as we're not focusing on God, he's happy. But the same goes for Easter, okay? Those little chocolate bunnies and the Easter eggs and whatnot, they're all pagan symbolism in honor of Astarte. You will see her name, Asherah, in Exodus, and it begins to morph from there into Ashtaroth and so on and so forth. And we know, obviously, that can be traced to Ishtar, but they're all goddesses of fertility, and that's in addition to everything else, depending on who's worshiping her. They all have the same lineup, right? I hope that makes sense. Anyway, my point is that the Muslims are in just as much trouble as any other legalistic religion that does not put Christ at the forefront of everything. Okay? It's uber Pharisaical. Uber Pharisaical. The Pharisees were all about they were all about the law, the oral law. Nobody could adhere to that. Least of all them. They were in major idol worship. Okay, so I kind of want to talk about the Mahdi right now and go over some of the characteristics that the Muslims believe he will have. I find this very interesting. Apparently, he's going to have a big noggin. He's going to have a large forehead and a very, what's called aquiline nose, which means it'll be somewhat long, like Romanesque looking. He will not always be the quote-unquote best Muslim, in the sense that apparently Allah will make him whole or right in one night. So what they're saying is that he's going to go out and just be a guy who doesn't seem to care, and then overnight he's going to just be like this awesome Muslim. I mean, whatever. But he will come at the worst of times in the world. He will come out at a time when there will be unrest, apparently, between three types of Muslims. Also, there will be an army that comes out of the east carrying black flags. He will be the leader of the army of black flags. And his plan is to attack the Dajall, who's apparently hiding out at the Kaaba because, according to Islam, you can't kill anybody there. So that's where the Dajjal goes. The Dajjal is the Antichrist. Okay, so here we have the Mahdi, and he's supposed to go out and he's going to kill their Antichrist. Okay, well, I think it's a little bit different. Okay, so here they are. They're all like moseying on over to the Kaaba, where they're going to go get this guy, the Dajjal. And all of a sudden, the ground splits open and swallows everybody up, except for just a couple of guys, of course, because you have to have a couple of guys that stick around and, witness everything. And it says that he will give everybody money and food, that he will have like the power to make it rain, and that he's going to have the power to make things grow, so on and so forth. And that he will be able to create prosperity for everybody that like believes him or believes in him. There will be peace. There will be peace, and he's going to rule for 7 years. I mean, are we starting to see a pattern yet? I'm just wondering. He is going to lead the Muslims on a white horse. Just tuck that away for a few. And he's going to fight in Damascus, and they'll find an ancient call for prayer. So basically what's going to happen is, the idea is they are going to fight the quote unquote Roman Empire. Okay, the Holy Roman Empire. Now, here's the thing. In their mind, the Holy Roman Empire is not, it's basically all of Europe and North America. Okay. And so they are coming to fight us. And they're like on their way, and there's they get to where they're supposed to be or whatever, and there's this call for prayer. They do it like 5 times a day, and the Mahdi is leading in prayer. He's about to lead in prayer, and before they start, they see none other than the man himself, Jesus Christ. And they call him Isa, by the way, and they see him coming down from heaven. He's on like the wings of 2 different angels. He's wearing a beige like vestures, if you will. And this area will apparently be located at a mosque in Damascus called the Minaret of Jesus. And it's going to be white. The Minaret of Jesus is white, and this is where he's coming. I don't know. It's kind of crazy to me, but that's what they're saying. And so there's a guy, his name is Kathir, and he's a prominent 14th century Muslim scholar. He backed up this notion that Jesus will descend not on the wings of angels, but rather on a group of righteous people. 800 men and 400 women, to be exact. These people will be preparing for the war at the time against the Dajjal. So, yeah. Another hadith states that it'll be to the east of the minaret of Isa. I mean, so basically, my point is this. You can see there isn't much consistency here because it's from like the oral tradition of the hadith. I'm just going to say this. I don't have that issue. I don't have that issue with my book. And after that, there's no more mentions of the Mahdi. Because apparently, Jesus takes care of the rest. Like, he comes down, crashes the party. He's like, give me that microphone. Okay, so here's the thing. Islamic tradition says that when Jesus returns, he comes to literally abolish Christianity entirely. Jesus, he said to break the crosses, kill all the swine, abolish the jizya tax, which is basically it's a non-Muslim tax that, well, it's a tax given by the Muslims to non-Muslims that live in their country. It says that they can be whatever they want to be, but they have to pay a tax if it's non-Muslim. And then the other thing is that he's supposed to kill the Muslim Antichrist and his followers. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, so here's my thing. So Jesus is, having a literal temper tantrum because that's what it kind of looks like to me. I just don't see him busying himself. I don't see any hero for that matter busying themselves with things like that, because unless of course he's divine, right? Which Islam says he's not. So there's that. And let's remember he's only got 7 years to do all this, but just saying. In fact, they say that after he kills the Antichrist, he goes on to live like a normal life. Like he gets married. After, I think it's 21 years, he gets married and then he has some babies. He's got kids. Really? So he lives for 40 years and then whatever. Something tells me it would take a lot longer than 7 years to deal with all the crosses and the piggies that are headed to the market. Just saying. And then, okay, so ultimately, the other thing too is that, so like I said before, he decides to get rid of the jizya. So he's saying y'all have to make a decision. Either it's Islam or it's the guillotine or the sword or whatever. There's one guy that I heard talk about a chainsaw. Just saying. So he decides to ditch that. And then ultimately, according to their tradition, he comes to kill the Dajall, who it turns out is a Muslim, and most of his followers are Jews and women. Why women? Why women? I don't know. I just don't know. But let's do a recap, because by the end of this, we're going to be able to put this baby to bed. That's right. Bedtime has come and gone. We're going to tuck it in nice and tight and sing it a lullaby. Maybe not. Maybe not sing it a lullaby. Okay, so remember, this is according to Islam. So, number one, I'm just going to go down the line. So Jesus is said to return to the earth in the last days near a mosque in Damascus. He will arrive at a time when the Mahdi and his army will be preparing to pray just before they go to war. He will be offered to lead the prayer by the Mahdi, but will decline in direct deference to the Mahdi, who Jesus declares to be the leader of the Muslims. He will then pray behind the Mahdi as a subordinate. He will be a faithful Muslim. He will make a pilgrimage to Mecca. He will visit Muhammad's grave and salute Muhammad, whereby Muhammad will return the salute from the grave. I'm I don't know how that's going to work, but anyway, he will destroy Christianity. He will repeal the jizya tax, thus causing the only option for Jews and Christians to convert to Islam or die. He will establish Islamic Sharia law throughout the entire earth. He will kill the Antichrist and his followers, made up largely of Jews and women. He will remain on the earth for roughly 40 years, during which time he will marry after 21 of those years and then have children and then die, probably from high cholesterol or something. The other thing, real quick, though, is that apparently when it comes time and they're ready to attack the Dajall, the doors open and Dajall comes out, and then Jesus, they're scanning everybody, and Jesus and Dajall lock eyes. And then apparently, this is according to tradition, of course, and then Dajall runs. He runs. He's like a coward. He runs. And Jesus runs after him. And I'm cracking up at this because all these things that you guys have him doing, right? Not you guys. I'm saying like the Muslims have him doing this. He's going to run after this guy. He's going to run after this guy. Finally, apparently, he catches up with him at an eastern gate in the city called Lud, which there is no city. There is a city called Lud, but I think it's an airport is what it is. It's an airport, but it's an eastern gate. So in their minds, it's an eastern gate of an airplane, like an airport. I don't know. Anyway, that's what they say. And that he stabs them, and then the end. That's what it is. But oh boy. Anyway, so the thing is that this Jesus is vastly different from my guy, okay? That in the Bible. I'm not chowing down with that guy. I'm chowing down with my guy. Frankly, this guy here that I was talking about is, I don't know. He's kind of a turdlet, if I don't say so myself. I like my Jesus. My Jesus is savage. He's nice. He brings me cookies sometimes. Okay, now let's bring this brick house down. I mean, I mean that with the utmost respect to you guys, okay? To my Muslim friends out there, the utmost respect. But here's the thing, and I don't want to I'm not trying to sound abrasive, but we're working against the end times clock here, if you guys haven't noticed. So I'm like more apt to rip off the kid gloves and just kind of put it out there. Okay. In the Quran, Surah chapter 4, verse 159, it says that Jesus comes down to, quote, personally correct the misrepresentations about himself, and that he never claimed to be the Son of God. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then I'm super confused on why the Pharisees and the Sadducees let Barabbas go instead of him. Because according to the outside biblical sources, let alone the Bible, but according to outside, let's just go outside, the major ruckus came because of the fact that that Jesus claimed to be the Son of God on at least 100 occasions, because he knew that Satan would try to pull that stunt. So he's just like, let me just make sure of this here, Not only that, but he claimed to be God himself when he said, before Abraham was, I am. I mean, I kind of feel like that's, John 8:58. So John chapter 8, verse 58. Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. Now look, it's understandable why that peeved the Jews, because they held that incident that happened at the burning bush, okay? And so they held that incident at the burning bush very near and dear to their hearts, and Jesus knew that. He knew exactly what to say to get his point across. Not to mention, there is wit. There is wit there. Who says that? Who says the incomplete sentence, as Abraham was, I am, and then make it make sense? God, that's who. When he said it about 1,500 years prior. Which is also another thing. Muhammad, he wasn't around until 700 years after Jesus, okay? So, yeah. All right, Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. Which means when Moses said, who should I say is sending me to go get these guys? God said, tell them tell him I am. Tell him it's I am that came. And they knew exactly. They believed Moses because of that very statement. Well, and probably because he turned his hand into leprosy and then not. And then the whole rod on the ground thing, Anyway, even the demons acknowledged that he's the Son of God. Matthew chapter 8, verse 29. And behold, they cried out, saying, what have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? I mean, I kind of feel like, they also said, art thou come hither to torment us before the time? So see, they know there's a time. They know that there's an appointed time where that whole thing is just going to crumble and fall apart for them. They know that. They admitted it. They acknowledged it. They said he was a son of God. Kind of feel like maybe, they should hear that. But on top of all this, okay, what about the people that are willing to live life under the constant persecution? This is back in that day, okay, under the constant persecution and die horrible deaths, okay, for the very fact that John 1:1 states that the Trinity is a thing. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word walked with God, and the Word was God, right? Jesus is the Word. So, yeah, I cannot believe for 1 second that the disciples died the way that they did to build a new religion. I just can't. But okay, so let's look at that for a moment here. What I want to make sure that you all understand is that Muhammad himself knew of the Gospels. He called them the Injil. And so here's my thing. If that's the case, where God needs to send a guy to come down and quote unquote correct us all on who God is, then that's saying that God used the wrong guy to begin with. Right? But here's the nail in the coffin right here. The Quran says that the Bible is true. And both Muhammad and Allah, they both quote from it. And Muhammad actually swore on it. He swore on the Torah. Okay, so how can this dude swear on the Torah if it's been corrupted? So either the Bible is corrupt and Allah and Muhammad are quoting from a corrupt source, okay, which would point to the idea that maybe Allah isn't all that and a bag of chips, seeing as, he can't figure out that the book he's quoting from is corrupt, or the Bible isn't corrupt and is 100% true. And we are starting to see the lie. We're starting to see the lie. So you see, this is beautiful. This is a beautiful case of circular reasoning. And you guys know how much I love that circular reasoning. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. I just won't get in. I just, I'll watch them go around and around on that carousel, but I am not getting on that thing because I don't like throwing up. Okay, so it goes like this. If the Quran is true, it says that the Bible is true. Okay, so if the Quran is true and it says that the Bible is true, then we have an issue here simply because of the fact that the Bible says there is no other word of God. None. We don't have hadith or tafsir. Okay, we have the Bible. This means that the Quran can't be true, right? Because if the Quran says the Bible is true, but the Bible says it's not, that there's no other word of God, then where's the problem lie? It lies in the Quran. So you cannot serve two masters. But here's the thing. Satan doesn't care if you're a good person. He doesn't care if you're praying 5 times a day. He does not care about that. Listen, if you're a Muslim, go look for yourself. Go look in chapter 5, verse 48, and you'll see that Muhammad is being told that the book, which in English it's 2 books, but in Arabic it means one, which is the Torah and the Injil together. Muhammad is being told that the book is true. Go look in Surah, chapter 1094. You'll see that Muhammad is doubtful and is then told to, quote, ask those who've been reading the scripture before him. And they're talking about the Jews and the Christians. Okay, but this is probably the most damning right here. This is Surah 61, so chapter 61, verse 6, and it says, when Jesus, son of Mary, or Isa bin Miriam, said, quote, children of Israel, I am indeed the messenger of God to you, confirming the Torah that is before me, and giving good tidings of a messenger who shall come after me, whose name shall be Ahmed. And here is the issue right here. You want to say that the Bible is corrupt because there is nothing in it regarding a guy named Ahmed. So there's nothing in the Bible regarding a guy named Ahmed who comes after him, right? But in reality, there's nothing in the Hadith or the Quran that speaks of this guy coming except for right there. Okay, so, there's like black and white. Okay, so you see where the contradictions are. I don't think it's the Bible that's corrupted. Okay, but to my Muslim friends out there, I will let you guys figure that out for yourself, and I pray that you do. And for those of you who are on the fence and looking for answers, there are many more. But what you just heard, okay, you guys just heard what I said. The, handful of you guys that are out there, you're now held accountable, just like the rest of us are. Once we hear the truth, we are all responsible for our own. That's it. We all have the option to say yay or nay. And understand this, the last thing Satan wants you to do is question it. Because as long as you don't, as long as you keep reading that book, all the while deep down inside knowing what you've been told is a lie, then you belong to him. Basically, every single religious text out there can be proven false simply by using it against it. Okay? You can use every text out there against itself, except for one. And this is what I've learned. And I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm passionate. I am extremely passionate about this. Okay? Because we are running out of time. We're running out of time. And I don't like to be a sensationalist. I'm not trying to be a sensationalist, but I know I'm not the only person out there who feels that urgency. I can't be, because I have emails all the time of other people out there saying, yep, I feel it. Okay, so, and then there's people out there who have no idea what this is about, but they are hungry for the truth because they feel like something's happening. So we're running out of time. So I'm just trying to lose the kid gloves here and spit the facts the best that I can. Okay, moving on. This guy, the Mahdi, he's got a name. His name is Muhammad. And the reason why his name is Muhammad is because Muhammad says so. He says, it's the name of my name. And then he says, and his father's name, which is Abdullah. So Muhammad Abdullah, that's going to be the Mahdi's name. By the way, you guys, there are many, many that have this name. It's extremely popular. So don't think you're going to go on the internet and go find them. It's like the word Mike, or the name Mike, I mean. And for all I know, that's what it means. I don't know. Just saying. Okay. So I also want to touch on something regarding a guy from Saudi Arabia, because I had a listener come on and he posed this question with the speculation that maybe there's this guy who could fit the role of Antichrist. The reason is because of his name. His name, he goes by MBS, which stands for Mohammed bin Salman. However, his father's name is Abdullah. Okay. King Abdullah was his name. And the issue here is that we have to remember that we need to go based on what the Bible says, not the books of Islam. And the fact is, Ezekiel 38 doesn't support that theory. I'll go into that in a little bit. But the other thing here is Isaiah 60. Isaiah 60 talks about how Saudi Arabia will show support for Yeshua and bring gifts to Jerusalem when Christ comes to set up his millennial reign. And what's interesting is the fact that the crown prince, MBS, he met with Biden. And while I see some manipulation here, I also see the attempt to normalize the relationship with Israel, which is something that would not have ever been considered 5 years ago. Okay, so basically Saudi Arabia intercepted some of the missiles, and MBS goes on to ask that the U.S. protect Saudi Arabia like we do Israel. Quote, "We want protection like you do with Israel." I have some opinions on that. I know. Imagine that, right? Normalization with Israel is not going to happen until the millennial kingdom. But I don't want to stay on that. But here's the thing, though, real quick. Saudi Arabia, they're loaded. So why do they need our protection? Why do they need our protection? They're loaded. No, they don't want our protection. They want our permission. That's what I think. Secondly, in Ezekiel 38, there are nations that will wag the finger at Gog. Basically say, oh, you attacked Israel? You shouldn't have done that. Okay? But then they do nothing about it. So I think that at the very least, Saudi Arabia is going to be one of those nations. But regardless, things are going to be much different when Christ crashes the party. Side note, this guy, MBS, has no comment on the 4 princesses that were reportedly being held hostage on the palace grounds. These are King Abdullah's daughters. And in fact, as soon as their father died, they vanished. So, missing princesses. Anyway, okay, so what does Islam have to say about their Antichrist? Okay, so he's called a Dajall, obviously, and he will have an issue with his eyes, as if he had a mortal wound, but still lived. Okay, here's the thing. We haven't gone through Revelation yet. There are some things that we went through that give some characteristics about the Antichrist that's in the Holy Bible. But regardless of anything, just hang on to these things because they're all very parallel. So, okay, apparently he's going to come from humble beginnings. He will be short. He will be very stocky. He will have a reddish complexion. He will have thick, curly hair. He's going to be bold-legged. He can't have children. He will have a large forehead. And that forehead will have the letters KFR on it, which means kafir. And the translation is unbeliever. Okay? And apparently everyone who's a Muslim will be able to see it. Apparently. One hadith says he will come from Khorasan, which is a historical region and realm It's a vast territory that lies in northeastern Iran, southern Turkmenistan, and then northern Afghanistan. He will apparently be known to the rest of the world, so he's going to basically make his debut while he's in Iraq. There's a place, and it's called Anisifan. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm totally blanking on that, but he's going to go to this place, okay? And this place, there's 70,000 Jews with him, and they're all going to be wearing prayer shawls. Okay, so he's in this area, and I want to say it's in like central Syria-ish. Asinafan. Anasafan? It might be. That's what it is. Anasafan. But 70,000 Jews are going to follow this guy. He will have the power to make it rain. He will be able to make things grow. He's going to, give people things. He's the dude over there, okay? And he will call himself God. Just like it says in Daniel. But this was the worst thing. So apparently, Muhammad tells everyone this. He says that Dajall will come with water on one side and paradise on the other. So, I'm sorry, water or paradise on one side and then fire on the other, and that the people who encounter him, like, apparently he's going to be so charismatic and so just hypnotizing that there's guys who like tie up all the women in their family in the house. Like he ties them up so that way they don't go out there and set eyes on him, because once they set eyes on him, they like fall in love with him, whatever. So the people that encounter him will have to make a decision. They'll decide that they will either jump into one or the other. He tells them that the water is really the fire. Muhammad tells them that the water is really the fire. So the paradise is really the fire, and the fire is really the water. Muhammad tells them that you should jump into the fire. He says, and don't worry, if it's too hard and you can't make up your mind, just close your eyes. Just close your eyes and jump into the fire. Like, what? No. Surah chapter 4, verses 157 and 158 says that even though the Jews boasted about killing Christ Jesus, they, quote, killed him not, nor crucified him. It was just made to appear to them that he was killed, okay? But there was like a body double, okay? Which that's blasphemy all on its own, because the whole reason was to resurrect him. So to me, that says a lot. But he says there was only conjecture to follow, that they didn't have certain knowledge, which is not true, because Joseph of Arimathea, he went and got him, and so did Nicodemus. So they, here you have two witnesses here that took him and wrapped him. But he says, nay, Allah raised him up to himself. So he raptured him, according to them. Surah chapter 5, verses 17 and 73 says basically that it's blasphemy to acknowledge God's Trinity and that there is only one. Many Muslim practices are not even mentioned in the Quran. They come from the Hadith, and the Mahdi and the Dajjal are just a couple of them. And I want to point out to you the very idea that the Muslims themselves have elevated what they themselves believe to be the word of men, which is what the Hadith is. And they've elevated that higher than what they deem to be the word of God, which is their Quran. Christians do the same exact thing. If it weren't so, guys like Kenneth Copeland, who literally performed a blood oath on TV, and in my opinion is a nutter, as well as a proven false prophet, he wouldn't still have a following. Okay. And there are scores more out there, but that's not why we're here today. I just wanted to say that, we do the same thing. Christians do the same thing. We elevate the men, which is not good. Don't put people on a pedestal. They will disappoint you every time. I'm going to disappoint you. I can guarantee that. I disappoint people every day. I disappoint myself. Oh, anyway, when I put on my jeans and they don't fit, just saying. Okay, so Islam did not set up any clergy. Okay, they have what's called the Maulanas, though. So they didn't set up any clergy, but the Maulanas are a thing. These guys they're religious leaders, much like the Vatican and its papacy. And they are given these inordinate powers and a lot of prestige. As a result, there's a lot of Muslims who are ignorant to the manipulation of the mullahs because they give their interpretations of the texts in order to fit their own agendas. So many rabbis, many priests, many pastors, and like gurus, okay, they all do the same thing. Not all, many of them. It's all part of the apostasy that we're going to see. You hear a lot of people say, there's going to be a revival. No, there's not. It doesn't say that in the Bible. The Bible does not say that. And in addition to this, and much like the Vatican discourages church members in reading their Bibles, because then questions arise, Muslims are also discouraged in reading their Quran in any other language than Arabic, and many don't understand Arabic. There's a variety of excuses that are given. Problems with the translations, too many questions will make you go mad. All of it is a tactic used to keep control of people's thinking, just like it was done, and it still is, in the Dark Ages and in the Inquisition. I went to a funeral yesterday of a family member, and it was in a Catholic church, and my sister and I are sitting there, and I'm like pointing out. Now, let me just preface this and just say that the priest that was there, he was actually pretty good. He did not venerate Mary at all. In fact, he turned around and pointed out the mural behind him and said, notice how he's not on the cross anymore. He's resurrected. I was like, yo, I felt like standing up and being like, woohoo, but that would be totally inappropriate, even though I firmly believe that our family member that had passed away would have joined in, just saying. He was a funny guy. But anyway, I pointed it out to my sister and said, there are no Bibles. You look in the pews. There are no Bibles. It was literally one of the biggest fights that my husband and I had ever gotten into, like 100 years ago. He's like, there's Bibles in there. I said, no, there's not. Those are hymn books. He's like, no, they're not. They're Bibles. Nope, they're hymn books. And yeah, so we are all, if you go to a Catholic church, you are discouraged to just go on Sundays and just listen to what the priest has to say. You're discouraged to read the Bible because we are told that we will not understand it. If you are not a Catholic and you go up for communion, you are supposed to put your hands in front of your chest so that you can receive a blessing. Listen, I don't think that's what Jesus intended. He did not set up a clergy. Why are we doing that, you guys? Why are we setting up clergies and whatnot? Why are the Muslims setting up clergies? Why is anybody setting up a clergy? Anyway. Okay. So why am I telling you guys all about this stuff, the Quran and whatnot? Well, one reason is so that you all have the potential information of well, all of the potential information, I should say, all of it. And know that it's not going to stop here with Islam. I mean, we're going to get into everything because I believe it's all relative. Okay, but the thing is that I feel like we need to know. We need to know because we need to teach others what to look for. And then the other thing is that I'm going to propose something here that is probably not going to make me very popular. Because I feel like some people might consider it disrespectful or whatever, and that's not my intention whatsoever. This isn't a personal thing. And like I said before, like my Muslim friends out there, please don't hate me. I don't want my head chopped off. I don't. But I'm willing to lose it if that's the case. But, that's not my intention to hurt anybody. So just let you guys know. So just bear with me. But there's a lot of characteristics that we hold in the Bible that make up the Antichrist. And it's like a blanket, in my opinion. It's like a blanket that covers this satanic trinity, if you will. Because even though the spirit of Antichrist was in the world back in John's day, the Antichrist himself as a human being doesn't actually come to fruition as the Antichrist until the end of days. And it's then that we see that he's got his buddy, the false prophet. And of course, he is the beast, which has to have some of the he's got to have some sort of economic system involved. I've heard some people say, no, it's not an economic system. Or it is an economic system. Well, here's the thing. How about it's both? Because if it's not, how else will he make it so that no one will be able to buy or sell unless one has the mark of the beast's name or the number of his name, which is Chi Xi stigma, by the way, 666. And that's a whole thing in and of its own right. I need to do a video on that, by the way, because otherwise no one's going to understand what I'm talking about. But in order to figure this thing out, we're going to need a recipe. We're going to need a recipe that will appease virtually everyone. So the Muslims, the Jews, right? The Christians alike, even the Hindus, even the ones that, worship frogs or cats or ants. So I'm suggesting that it's going to be something not necessarily new, but new in the sense that it's simply like an unholy trinity with some good old-fashioned DEI. That whole diversity, equity thing. The diversity will satisfy everyone, right? In being equal, balanced, Jewish, Christian, and Arab. Okay, and I can hear the groans already, you guys. Just stick with me. You won't be sorry. At least I hope you won't. Okay, so how is this possible? All right, well, right out of the gate, please don't think that I'm throwing a blanket statement over all the people that I'm referencing here that have this sort of faith. This is strictly just a leadership blanket, okay? So as we can see here, it turns out that Islam and Christianity have a lot in common with regard to the characteristics listed in our very own Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and their Quran and Hadith, etc. So I have this hypothesis. What if the Islamic Mahdi and the Christian false prophet are under the same umbrella? Could it be possible to merge the two together somehow? We know, for instance, and I'm not saying that the Pope is, equal to the Mahdi, because I don't think Pope Francis can get on a horse, but I'm just saying. We know that Pope Francis and Sheikh Ahmad Al-Tayeb, who is the Grand Imam of Al-Zahar, they both addressed a UN meeting saying that there's a need for human fraternity. And also the Sheikh, of course, slipping one in there, said that we need to recognize Palestine as a state after 75 years, but whatever. Who's counting? My point is that since Satan mimics all things God, why wouldn't he mimic this too? Like, think about that for a second. I feel like we're putting God in a box. When it really needs to be, we need to kind of open that up a little bit. Moreover, Daniel gives us a really vivid yet complicated picture of some beasts that he talks about. Two of them, in fact, that seem to be comprised of several beasts, which I'll get into. But here's the thing. If we let the Bible interpret the prophecies, we'll get a much clearer picture. For example, whenever we see something coming out of the sea, quote, coming out of the sea, we know it's a multitude of nations, which means it's Gentile. So let's remember something real quick here. Genesis chapter 49, verse 16 and 17. Dan. Now, I read this in the last episode. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Judah. Dan shall be a serpent by the way. And it goes on from there. But if we stop right there and just ask ourselves, number one, who is the way? Is it saying Dan shall be a serpent by the way? Or is it saying Dan shall be a serpent by the way? Right? I do that whenever I see the phrase the way. And some of the stuff is really cool. It's like playing Mad Libs, Bible edition. But that's something that I ask, right? Okay, anyway, it goes on. So Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backwards. Okay, so we know by Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, which was the first prophecy in which the Nakash has something he can't seem to get away from, and that's feet. Like you'd think he'd learn. He bruises heels, but seems to somehow find his head underneath the feet. And I'm just going to say he's going to have quite a headache when this is all over. Okay, moving on. So I'm going to read this whole thing, and then we're going to break this down. Okay, so Isaiah chapter 14, verses 29 through 32. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent. And the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy shall lie down in safety. And I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. Howl, O gate, cry, O city, thou whole Palestina art dissolved. For there shall come from the north a smoke, and none shall be alone in his appointed times. What shall then answer the messengers of the nation? That the Lord hath founded Zion, and the poor of his people shall trust in it. Okay, so in breaking this down, we're going to do my favorite thing, and that's apply the W's. First of all, the serpents in the first two passages I read are the Nakash. These are the same as the serpent in the garden. Just so we know who we're dealing with. Second, when reading the verse in Genesis, we see that Dan is a jerk, but also he's a serpent, a Nakash, a deceiver in the way as well. So just hang on to that fact that Dan was a Jew and he's a turd, because we're going to come back to that. So W's here. Okay, so what is Palestina? Okay, well, it's the Philistines. And that has morphed over the course of time to Palestine. Okay, what's the root? Isaiah speaks of a serpent's root in chapter 14. And whenever the Bible's speaking of a root, it's speaking of a lineage, a bloodline. Just like Christ came from the root of Jesse, so does the Antichrist come from the root of the serpent, of Satan. Okay, then we see there's fruit that's produced. Like, oh, great. I want some of that. No, definitely not. Okay, the Bible tells us that we will know what kind of tree we're dealing with by scoping out the fruit, okay? And I'll get to that in just a second, but for now, let's check who the players are. Okay, so if you were to read the whole chapter of Isaiah 14, you'd see that Antichrist is referenced quite a bit. He's the Assyrian, and God says that he's going to lay the smackdown on him in Israel, which I find very interesting. But there's some details also here that are important. In fact, it's safe to say that every letter in the whole book is just that every detail can be peeled like an onion. For example, we know that no matter what occurs, according to verse 1, God's going to choose Israel. Verse 1, for the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. Okay. Strangers? Who are the strangers? I think it's the Christians, the true Christians. I think it's the Gentiles who are followers of Christ, and we will be joined together. The Bible says we are grafted into that tree. And it looks to me like God's he's not a happy camper here. Y'all, if you read that, it looks like he's pissed. Straight up. He is not happy. He says he's sending famine. And what I find interesting here is that the way that looks almost looks like famine in and of itself is an entity that like has legs or something. Like he says, I'm sending famine. Like it's an old college roommate that's, always eating your leftovers or something. Like, but it's the sending that gets me versus causing a famine. Okay, so then I have to ask this. Is that the third seal? Is this the same famine that sits on the black horse in Revelation? Revelation 6:6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny. It's actually a denarius, which is equal to a day's wages. Says, a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Good man. Leave that oil, leave that wine alone. We gonna need it. It's funny. Anyway, that would make sense to me. So here he's saying that he's going to send famine and whomever's left will be discontinued. Like taken off the shelf, out of circulation, non-refundable. But my question is, when it says he will slay, who's he? Who's he? And he will slay the remnant. I strongly believe that it's famine. And famine will be an angel. And here's why. If you like to check other translations, go check out Young's literal translation. This was translated by a guy named Robert Young, who he believed in a strictly literal translation of God's word. So I feel like it lends itself to some solid supplementation of the KJV, okay? So the King James says, and the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy shall lie down in safety, and I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant, okay? Now the Young's says that it shall slay the remnant. So by looking at them both, we can see that the it is in fact a he. Let's get our pronouns right, people. But I do believe that this is the rider on the black horse in Revelation. Another thing that leads me to believe that this is the third seal is verse 26 of Isaiah 14. It says, this is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out upon all the nations. It's talking about God's hand. Okay, then it's for the whole earth. Okay, well then to me that's a seal, dude. However, in the midst of all this, we do see that Palestine in particular is wiped out. It says they are going to be dissolved. And listen, when I read that, like, okay, so the word here is called moog. That is the Hebrew, moog. And it means to melt, to cause to melt, to faint, to cause to melt away, to soften, dissolve, dissipate, to melt, flow. To melt, okay? Young's literal says, Howl, O gate, cry, O city, melted art thou, Philistia, all of thee. For from the north smoke hath come, and there is none alone in his set places. Y'all, that's going to be a really rough day at the zoo, if you know what I'm talking about. We see that a smoke will be responsible for the melting. So logically, that indicates that whatever it is, it's going to be hot. Like really hot. What's more, it's coming from the north. Okay, here we go. So let's go ahead and touch on the Antichrist role in Ezekiel 38. Okay, whatever that smoke is, it wipes everybody out. It's going to leave a huge wake of destruction behind. And I'll get into that destruction and how it relates to Revelation in the next episode or the one immediately following. But you're going to find loads of conjecture as to who the nations are that are going to attack Israel in Ezekiel 38. I have in the past leaned towards Russia wholly, being at the helm for a really long time, simply because of the extra biblical sources that are handed down, basically saying that it's all migration. So they migrated from Turkey and eventually went into, they're Scythians is what they were. And then they went into Russia. However, the actual Magog was in Turkey. And when you look at it from Ezekiel's standpoint, he didn't know about Russia, and he certainly didn't know when this prophecy was going to come to pass. So I guess my point is, I feel like it could be both. Okay? We know he was talking about Turkey, but we can't put God in a box. Okay? So my opinion is that it could definitely be both. God is clever and creative. However, okay, a lot of people are simply seeing Gog as the, quote, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and not the prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal, because the Hebrew term Rosh, which means head, chief, or foremost, is actually modifying Gog's title as a prince, a Nazi. It is not the name of a particular place. And that word Rosh is what piqued my interest to go digging in that aspect, because Rosh was actually supposed to be the name of Russia. But the text just, it's strange. It's not lining up like, where it's clear cut. But what I do know, what I do understand is that Russia is definitely aligned with guys like Iran and Turkey. And those guys are definitely named in Ezekiel 38. Anyway, they're both good candidates, in my opinion. I suppose because of Russia's circumstances right now, and then the fact that Turkey's been calling for an attack on Israel since 2017, they're an Islamic state. They're both to the north. And, Russia's sitting in the Golan currently. I mean, yeah, whichever one it is, Gog represents the Assyrian, who is the Antichrist. And we know that based on Ezekiel 38, this one has been prophesied about by former prophets as well. Ezekiel 38:17. Thus saith the Lord God, are you he of whom I spoke in former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel, who in those days prophesied for years that I would bring you against them? Like, I think God's got a sense of humor. He's sitting there going, like he's speaking like it's a child. Did you really go outside to play when you did not have your room cleaned? Did you really eat that ice cream after you brushed your teeth? Who took my last Diet Pepsi? Anyways, all right, so there we have a clue guys, it's not going to be pretty. So based on all this information, I feel like we can come to the conclusion that the root spoken of in Isaiah 14:29 is Satan. But the people that he's going to use will be Gentile. But I'll go further in that. He is going to be an Arab. And there's more evidence to this, but just hold on to that for a moment. Revelation chapter 16, verse 13. This is in Young's. And I saw come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. Okay, I'm pointing to these, that they are 3 separate entities under the same umbrella. Okay, but who are they exactly? Well, we have Isaiah. He's my guy right there. He helps us out with this one. He says, Isaiah chapter 27, verse 1. In that day, okay, we know that's a prophecy. In that day, the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, Leviathan, the crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Who are these guys? Well, the piercing serpent, I have reason to believe, is whomever the false prophet will be. And I believe, and don't hate me, I believe that he will be of the papacy. I believe he's going to be part of the Vatican. Why? Because Isaiah 53. He says, well, that's a prophecy of Christ, as if Christ is like speaking it himself. He says, they have pierced my hands and my feet. Rome pierces Jesus. The crooked serpent, yes, the good old crooked serpent, I believe that this is the beast. And as I said before, I believe that he's going to be connected to the Holy Roman Empire. Just saying. I believe he's crooked because of money. And I'm not ready to divulge that just yet. There are some puzzle pieces that need to be brought forth first. But then, of course, there's the dragon. The dragon is the Antichrist. He is in the sea, which makes him a Gentile, not a Jew. And I feel like every single time I say that, I hear Adam Sandler in the background, not a Jew. Okay, but wait, there's more. If we go back to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 29, where we read about the seed that comes forth as a cockatrice, we will see a couple of things that are interesting. In the KJV, he says that the seed will come forth as a cockatrice, but in other versions, it says a viper or an adder. So basically, a snake. But a cockatrice is interesting. It's apparently a mythical creature that looks like a cockadoodle-doo and a snake at the same time. And it all had, I'll be honest, I have no idea where that translation came from. No clue. Because why a viper or adder, but yet a rooster? I don't know. But here is why I'm shedding light on it. Okay, guys, this thing happens to look just like the double-headed eagle of the Holy Roman Empire. Now, also understand that the double-headed eagle is also sometimes single. So there's that. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 29, rejoice not thou whole Palestina, because of the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery serpent. Okay, look. If you go and you look up the Holy Roman Empire, there's a book. Look up the book of the kingdoms. You will see what seems to be like 2 roosters with fire coming out of their mouths. It's really strange. Anyway, so if the fruit of this guy is going to be a fiery serpent, then we're talking about a seraph. In fact, the Young's literal translation says seraph. Remember, Young's translates the literal words. So sometimes it can be difficult to understand, but not in this sense. In Hebrew, it's seraph, and a seraph is an angel, but it's not going to be a good angel. When we read on, we see that God takes out this initial root of Satan's seed, meaning that line that leads up to the Antichrist, obviously it has to be taken out after he's born. But it turns out that this seraph will take out the rest of the remnant. And again, this has to happen after the Antichrist is born. So I wanted to point something out here. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 25, I will break the Assyrian in my land, and upon my mountains tread him underfoot. Then shall his yoke depart off of them, and his burden depart from their shoulders. Okay, remember, this is for the whole earth. So this yoke is for everyone except those who are in Christ. And he's breaking the Assyrian in Israel. So by this time, if we see in Isaiah 14 that it is in fact the third seal, then war is already happening by this point because the second seal is opened, and that seal is the red horse, who went off and stomped his feet and had a temper tantrum and decided to blow some things up. Revelation chapter 6, verse 5 says, and when he opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And I beheld, lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. Okay, it's really only logical that famine would come immediately after war, but he's also got scales in his hands. Obviously, that's important. It's an important clue. So now this is purely conjecture on my part, but I feel like once we see Russia and Turkey, or Turkey at the very least, attack Israel, I feel like it's like a duo there, but we're going to have about 3.5 years of war on our hands. And then hopefully we're out of here. But when we move on to the fourth seal, we see that he's got his cousin on board. Death and hell. It's a wonderful trio. And in Revelation chapter 6, verse 7 and 8, it says, and when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast come and say, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. So we have like this gang with a mama that doesn't know how to pick out names for their child. You don't call your name Death unless you're Methuselah's mom and dad. Like they named him, and his death shall bring. Anyway, okay. The power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword and with hunger and with death and with the beasts of the earth. So chaos. But death and hell, this is Thanatos and Hades in the Greek. They should sound familiar to you, but if not, go look them up. Then, of course, we have the fifth seal, which is the martyrs of the Great Tribulation. And then comes the sixth seal, which is terror. Yay. And my guy, let me tell you, if you're not a Jesus freak by that point, you're going to wish you had been, because that's just the prelude to the extreme nasty that's on its way in the form of 7 trumpets and 3 woes. And that's when all hell breaks loose. And that's just the beginning as far as I'm concerned. But I'll dig into all that in the next episode, but because it's confusing as to what happens and when. But there are 2 vantage points of the same things. So we'll get into that. Okay, so back to this rooster serpent thingy. What if this particular cockatrice is the very image we see on the ensign of the Holy Roman Empire? Because I think that might be a thing. What comes out of it is a fiery angel, right? What if the Holy Roman Empire is what ushers in this fiery serpent that is famine, that is also the third seal? Okay, now before anybody goes off on me saying that, I'm calling people Antichrist and gets all huffy and puffy, it's important to understand that in no way am I claiming that Catholics are the Antichrist. Okay? I don't believe that a person who claims to be Catholic is going to hell. It's all, I don't believe that. I, in fact, believe that Catholics are necessary because I believe that they fulfill a portion of the prophecy in Revelation 17, which I won't get into right now, but it says that they testify to Jesus Christ. So, no, I don't think you're going to hell. However, I'm sure that it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the leaders of the nations and the religious sects and all the governments and whatever and see that there's a level of corruption that has taken place. There's a book by a guy named Malachi Martin, who's a man that spent a really long time in the Vatican. He actually advised some of the guys in the papacy. He was a Jesuit priest who had a front row seat to the things that were going on inside that Vatican. And he came forward to say that there was a lot of evil people within it. And so I tend to give some credit and some weight to the claims that Malachi Martin made, as, not only was he an author about it, but he was because he was a former Jesuit, but he was also an exorcist. So he was, exorcising demons, Like, I feel like if anybody's going to ever learn how to spot evil, it's going to be a guy like that. The Bible tells us that there's going to be wolves that will come in sheep's clothing, and they will sit at our very tables and they will eat with us. Why should the leaders of the churches, of the Vatican, of all religious organizations, all governments, why should they be any different? Are we supposed to just simply set aside any discernment that we have and trust what they say because of the titles or positions that they hold, or how much money they have? I'm confident that Jesus himself made an example of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and why we should not do that very thing. Okay? However, the bottom line is that if the shoe fits, yeah. So what goes into that shoe exactly? Well, knowing what we know regarding how these three religions feel about their faith, we should take a look at the secular side of them. The idea here is to see which one would be easiest to persuade. So, which one takes their religion more seriously? In my opinion, that's the Muslims. There are 1.9 billion of them worldwide, and, let's be real, they're willing to, commit a murder or suicide for it. Next, I'd say that it's the Christians. They would be the ones to take their religious more seriously than the Jews. I believe that Christians in general would be more apt to die for it, but not kill for it. At least not in today's world. And the only reason why I say this is because while both of the Christians and the Jews and even the Muslims are extremely secular in that they've gotten away from their scripture and really have fallen into more of the tradition of everything, there are 2.4 billion Christians worldwide, as opposed to the 14.7 million practicing Jews worldwide. And that's not including those who have converted to Judaism. If we include that stat, then it's only around 20 million still. So by mathematical default, there's more of a chance, there's a probability that more Christians will take their religion seriously than Jews. Okay, so that's why I'm saying that. It has nothing to do with people being better than others. That's not the case. It's math. Also, Israel in general has become extremely secular and progressive. 35% of Jews in Israel are Reform. This means that, in short, they put more effort into tradition of being Jewish rather than the book. So why am I saying this? Okay, well, because the idea here is to figure out who would be the easiest to mislead. Because the Antichrist is going to need to mislead, right? He needs to deceive. Okay, well, the Jews are waiting for their Messiah. And this Messiah is going to be, an awesome military leader, right? And very political. The Christians are waiting for Jesus. And the Muslims are waiting for both. So what if the man called Antichrist, the one who will be at the head of the table, is also their Mahdi? The Muslims are looking for a political military leader too. Not so much as a religious one. They're looking for someone to come set up the caliphate, but this guy's going to be more of a hotshot in the political realm. Look at what Daniel said in chapter 11, verse 21. He says, and of course, there's 37 it's chapter 11, verses 21, 24 and then 37. And he says, quote, "And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries." 24. "He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province. And he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time." 37. "Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all." This tells me that he comes in peacefully and doesn't hold a high regard or respect per se, but rather he gives a lot of lip service and sweet talk. And the fact that he comes upon the fattest parts of the land peaceably, does what no other person in his lineage has done, tells me that this isn't a Jew. Okay, but history has taught us one thing, and that's that the Jews and the Arabs are definitely willing to sign a peace treaty with each other. So that's not an issue because they've done it several times in the past. Every U.S. president has always tried to be that guy that does a peace treaty. And they hope that it works. And I'm like, why? No, you don't want to be that guy. Because if you're that guy, then things are going to be really bad for you. Okay, but what I'm saying is that he doesn't necessarily have to be a Muslim. We've seen that too. He's just got to be super charismatic. Maybe have a Muslim upbringing and be a great military leader, but not really regard it. And guess what? The Jews are looking for the very same dude. Okay? The Christians are in a little bit of a different boat. They're all thinking that he will simply be a political figure and unwittingly they will follow a guy connected to the Vatican or something. And if that guy is the false prophet who happens to be endorsing said Antichrist, well, we've just managed to check 2 boxes for the 3 religious superpowers. And the only one left is the beast. And he's not only just a dude, but he's also the puppet behind the global economy. But we need to save that for part 3. Guys, listen. I don't know what Jesus is doing. I hope that he comes back first, but the bottom line is that it's on his time. So we got to occupy, we got to do what we're supposed to be doing. What's more is that we should not be scared. Do not be scared. Instead, be prepared. And I'm not talking about bunkers, you guys. Bunkers won't save anybody. And if they do, it's literally only for a minute. The only one who's going to save us is Jesus. And he's knocking at that door. Get off the couch. Go answer it. Because behold, he brings grub for the hungry. That's it today, you guys. That's it. I tried to go as fast as I could to get all that out. Keep it under 3,000 years, per usual. Thank you so much for your patience with me, you guys. Be sure to check out the social media and do all the things and do the dance and comment and like and share, blah, blah. Your verse of the day is Colossians chapter 2, verse 8. This is Brianna signing off, saying, God bless.